Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Life Burst Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Andrew.
I'm your other host, Tiffany.
And welcome to the Life Burst Podcast, where we talk about the Wixossy things.
And only the Wixoss things.
That's true. That's what we do.
That's what we do.
Hey, Tiffany.
Hey, Andrew.
So, how was your Wixoss week?
It was okay.
Yeah.
We did a tournament on Card Garden, and I got dead last.
Well, yeah. We were testing out some stuff with Card Garden.
Yeah.
Just literally throwing some random crap out there and seeing what happens.
Seeing what happens.
Tiffany, what were you testing with?
I decided to test a Cosmos with Musica in the center.
Mm-hmm.
And who are my two assistants? Tama and X.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Would not recommend.
No, you'd not recommend going completely aggro and no defense whatsoever.
I would not recommend that. It's not the best strategy.
We wanted to test it. We wanted to see what if we went balls to the walls aggro to see if we can just outdo people's defenses, and it almost got there, but not quite.
I was able to consistently get my opponents down to 0 life cloth. Twice I was able to get them to 0 life cloth before I got to 0 life cloth. But at the end of the day, having a lack of a 3-stop assist Larig with attack phase timing really bit me in the butt.
Yeah, just some preemptive testing against
Yes.
for like Dash Hirana stuff. Now, Dash Hirana can put one more crush than what we could consistently put with that, which theoretically could make all the difference in that scenario.
Yes.
Well, we were just testing some things out. I was testing some things out too. I guess my tests went a little better than you because I got first place.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty good. I was running Deus Adams, and my main reasoning for wanting to run that was to test. Oh, it's back. He natural element.
Helium
Natural element.
Mm-hmm.
Just because it's got this weird ability, and it did succeed in every single time I played it. My opponent said, "What does that card do?" Because no one's played it in a long time. But what that card does is it downs the L rig if it's vanished outside of battle, which is wacky, but kind of cool against Tama, kind of cool against like Dash Hirana stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to test out if it was that great, and it was awkward for my opponents to deal with every single time I put it out. But it was also awkward for me to put out because it was a level 2, and like I would rather just have stronger level 1 utilities out when I want to put out that. So it ends up being a pretty net neutral. I at the same time, I'm like, maybe it should have just been a Zhao Yun or something,
Yeah.
because that would have done the job of being an annoying blocker at a low level that he wasn't doing. But that was fun. I got first place. Like I said, I played against some aggro decks, some mid-range decks, and some Espertama stuffs. So
Thank you for the lion playmat.
yes, I did. I guess I technically won Lucky Yuki Lion playmat. That is no longer mine. It's now Tiffany's.
It's mine. It's like I really want that playmat.
And as far as the comments, go, we always highlight some stuff. The thing that I want to highlight is everyone's starting to send in their winning deck lists from their ceremonies.
Ooh.
Yeah, and it's been super, 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 super good. And I've been featuring them off on the channel, so everyone can see what you guys have brewed up. It's also really kind of cool to see listeners to our channel like being like, "Look, I won! I've got the Xeno."
Oh, you selectors! We're so proud of you.
Yeah. But if we're gonna do one more shout out, and I would love to get a ton of comments for this one, guys, because it's a genuine question that I have, is that recently they just announced the prizes that you can get for the GP, and among the more interesting prizes that you can get for the GP is if you are the top scoring selector with a certain center L rig, you win a sleepy of that.
Yeah.
That.
Which is really cool. I actually like that a lot because I think it's going to help to promote a lot of Larig diversity for the GP, which is something, I personally really want to see. It's what makes Wixoss exciting.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. I'm excited to see what people will play.
Yeah, and so what I want to ask you guys specifically is, are you planning on bringing your own, like, your own center like deck, so that way you can try to win the sleepy, or are you trying to bring something tiered to potentially
Like
score
win
up
the whole
higher?
thing.
But then if you don't score up higher, you won't win anything potentially, you know. Whereas if you brought just the best music deck, you're going to get a question mark sleepy. I think it's question mark.
I don't
I think
think
it's
it
just
is.
a normal sleepy. Okay.
Yeah, it's don't question marks don't exist.
Right. They're the cooler ones. All right.
Like they do exist, but I personally believe that they don't exist
We've
because
seen
I've
one.
never
We've seen one. We saw a
I
Tama
saw
one.
a picture of
We saw
one.
a Tama one in real life. One of our locals has a Tama one.
Oh yeah. Okay, one exists.
So, anyways, guys, that's the real question. Let me know if you're going to bring some kind of standard deck or if you're going to bring a favorite deck. I maybe I'll even throw this up as a poll later down the line.
Oh yeah.
I would love to know what people are doing with it. Because it ties directly into our last video discussion of the GP first look.
This is part 3
Of 3.
of 3.
That's it. So
Just kidding. It's just the third of the third one.
yeah, so as you guys know, we've done quite a bit of stuff. We've talked about Dasharana. We've talked about blue control decks. We've talked about blue tempo decks. We've also talked about green enter decks on our second episode. And we've talked about DXM and Atomic. So that brings us to the next discussion, which is black or white mid-range.
So this is black or white mid-range, not black and white
You
mid-range?
usually mix the two, but they don't have to be mixed. Generally speaking, white mid-range and black mid-range, weirdly enough, share a lot of similarities, even if you're not mixing the two, that you end up with almost the same-esque kind of deck. Right, like black midrange does usually a lot of card filtering from its trash, and white midrange usually does a lot of card filtering from the top of the deck. In the end, it just ends up being this sort of like umbrella card filters, and that gets you sort of card selection. So that's kind of why the two are just lumped together on the same one. There's not a ton that define them as different. And a lot of times when you're playing black card filtering, you want the annoying white Signy, and a lot of times when you're playing the white filtering decks, you want some more redundancy in your filtering, and you end up going into black anyways. So yeah.
Gotcha. So let's get into that. There are, of course, pros and cons to every sort of deck. So the pros for this are you get card advantage, you have a really defensive board, and you get access to better deck filtering than you would with other decks. Some of the cons are it can be one-dimensional, it's interactive, and the damage options are pretty weak.
Yeah, I think I should have said uninteractive.
I don't think that interactive is a bad thing.
Yeah,
so this is uninteractive. Sorry.
Yeah. So let's talk about it. So, you know, in essence, we were talking a lot about that card filtering, right? So the card filtering ends up being like, yeah, you're going to get card advantage because you're going to be like, for example, one of the decks that I know a lot of people make fun of for probably fine reasons is Sandbaka, right? However, Sandbaka is like the king of card advantage. Like you cannot discard them out. That's one of the reasons why when I was making that joke about how I got 5th place with Nova, the deck that I was actually secretly the most scared to see was Sandbaka, because like it was impossible. You could even with as much discard humanly possible, you cannot keep them on a 0 card hand. And that is also a white-black mid-range deck.
Yep.
So it just has so much card advantage that it's pulling.
So what about having a defensive board?
All right, well, yeah, let's play the defensive board game. Like, what is it? As an aggro player, Tiffany, you tell me, what are the most annoying Signy to see on the other side of the field?
Really big Signy. Signy with shadow. Signy with like negation effects.
Yep.
What else? Signy that have really defensive life bursts. That sort of thing.
So stuff like Exia, right? Coella. You said like wall Signy, so that could be Baphomet. That could
Zhao
be
Yun for shadow.
Yeah, you got like all these things with shadow. Yeah, I mean the truth is
Yuki's got negating effects.
there's just a ton of different ways that you can basically with white or black just really nullify out what your opponent's board is, right? One of the most easiest 13Ks that you can build on your Signies is Animirage, for example.
Yep.
So yeah, there's a lot of defensive options to be had in specifically white and black. And then deck filtering, we are kind of covered it. You can get it from the trash, you can get it from the top of the deck. Either way, they're doing a ton of deck filtering to make sure they always have the right answer for what they want their boards to do. It rewards you deck building with a certain idea of like, I want my 3/3/1 boards to look like this.
Yeah. And I mean, that kind of really plays into mid-range as well, because you're always looking for the answers for your turn so that you can best maximize each turn.
Yeah.
So for the cons, what do you mean it can be one-dimensional?
Well, I mean, if the deck is just basically saying, I'm milling myself, and then I'm going to pull out some really cool defensive board signy, right? Like, the opponent could be like, cool, I'll get Assassin, and what are you going to do about that? And then they might be like, nothing. I'm going to do nothing about that because I have one game plan, and if you do not fall within my broad scope of things that I can stop, then it's not working.
Does that also tie into its uninteractiveness?
Yeah, so it leans on some proactiveness, right? Like, so for example, Exia is proactive because you stick it out there and you're like, yep, it's going to do a job, I hope. But it's not really interacting with your opponent. It's just basically saying, opponent, if you can get around this, then I'm going to lose to this.
Right.
But it's proactive because you're putting it out there and being like, deal with it, you know? It has very few things that interact directly with your opponent's turn, right? Green arguably has some more of that. Blue has a fair amount of that kind of stuff where it like can do things on your opponent's turn. For example, Primoria freezes stuff on your opponent's turn. Tamago discards on your opponent's turn. You know, it's got some options there.
Yeah.
There's things that trigger on the opponent's turn. Red even has some amount, which is strange to say because you don't usually see it. But white and black, generally speaking, have proactive options where you're putting things out there, and if it again falls under the scope of your opponent's interactions, great, then you're interacting with them. If it does not, it's just a signy on the opponent's board. That's it.
Okay. And then for the damage options being weak, are we talking about removal or are we talking about like direct life cloth damage?
We're talking about removal, although you could argue that any form of damage is damage. So direct life cloth as well covered by that. But like, okay, so
I mean, I don't know. Black comes with a lot of negativing effects.
Yeah, black does come with a lot of negative effects, but they're usually negative 8,000, right? You very rarely get negative 12,000, which means that you're gonna struggle against a 3/3/2 board. Sometimes there's ones that are like can get huge, right? Like Donna. And then you're gonna struggle against that kind of board for the negative effects. You've got pieces, right, that do open lanes for sure, like Death Deck or something, or White Heaven. But outside of that's another thing is though, in order to gain those damages, you have to sacrifice interactivity with your opponent, right? Like you could run an Anj assist to help you out with your damage output, but then you are, you know, just like you discovered, you know, on Saturday that not interacting with your opponent kind of sucks.
Yeah, it's a little one-sided.
So yeah, there's just like
outside of it not being a super great game strategy, it's also a little dull. Like you're just waiting for your turn, and that's not very much fun.
Yeah, totally. But like yeah, there's very few ways to really put damage out there in those color combos. So you need to rely on maybe other colors to get you there, right? Like green gets one of the best things that you can do is add green to black because then you get access to Lancer, and that's pretty good. It deals with the things that the negative effects can't really deal with, right? So yeah, like for example, one of the best cards that overperformed recently for me is Caesar. Black Assassin is really good. It's also really rare. So yeah.
All right. Let's move on to some of the lyrics that we would think of when we're thinking about black or white mid-range.
Yeah, I think I've got a black panel here, and then we talk about the white panel next. So we've got Deus. I mean, it feels like
it's classic.
It's classic. You talk about Deus all the time.
Yeah.
It's starting to get to the point where like you have other options other than Deus now, which is cool. But one of the things that Deus offers that the rest of them don't is it offers damage output, right? The souls.
Yes.
The other thing that it does is it gives you card filtering, because again, you can bring 3 cards back from your trash, which is really great. But you'll see that basically in all of these, right? Like if you look at all of them, they all offer damage and they all offer card filtering. That is what unifies these guys. So for example, let's talk about Iona, which has actually recently seen a popularity spike. A lot of people have been playing it, and they've actually been pretty good.
I've played against Iona, and I was like, whoa, what's going on here?
Yeah.
It's a very interesting Lureg.
Yeah, and again, its enter ability is you put a Signy from your trash to the field, and its once a game ability opens up 3 lanes. So again, that's what you're looking for. Some amount of opening up lanes and some amount of filtering. Yeah. So Gunzo is the next one. The card actually just came out on Facebook, but I've got our translation for us here. Thanks.
Yeah, give or take. This is our translation.
Yeah, shout out to the wiki, the Wixoss wiki. I can't believe I called it Wixoss.
You're fired.
I'm fired. The wiki for having
the
Wixoss
wiki. Yeah. Yes. So this one's brand new. You get 2 coins. Enter, look at the top 5 cards of your deck, put one of those cards into your trash, and put the rest at the bottom of your deck in any order. Action once a turn, paying a black and a colorless, put target Signy from your trash to your field. Action once a game, this turn, whenever one of your Signies enters your field from your trash, target Signy on your opponent's field gets minus 8,000 power until end of turn.
Yeah. So again, filtering, lane openings. That's what those things do. Moving on to the next one. There's only 2 that I'm giving the shout out for here on this. That's Tama, as well as Akino.
Yeah, good old classic center Akino.
Yeah, so Tama is, I mean, I think everyone knows it at this point. It's shown up enough. It's got damage output, and it's also got filtering with its 2 abilities.
Yep.
Akino is a more surprising take. It was a deck that was really piloted by like Chair for a while, and he was doing a really, really great job with it. But like the Akino midrange decks kind of put out these annoying white Signy that are hard to deal with, hard to kill. And then you use its auto trigger where you get trash your Signy and also pay an enter, and then you can bounce an opponent's Signy. Right? So it's always allowing you to get in 1 damage. Which is basically the same thing that Tama does, just Tama does it with an Elrig's swing.
Instead of the Signies.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But, you draw a card, you enter charge. That's kind of like filtering. It's also got a kind of rad ability where you give all your Signy shadow.
And it's just shadow.
Yeah.
Like, it's not shadow with stipulation. Yeah. So it gets shadow from all of the Luregs and shadow from all of the Signy and all of the life bursts.
Yeah, it is really good.
And spells.
Yeah, you don't get it on your turn, but you get it on your opponent's turn, which gives them a little bit of time to maneuver around. But
main phase and attack phase of your opponent's next turn.
Yep. So but it basically guarantees that whatever board you put up on your attack, like if it survives your attack phase, will stay there until your next turn, which can help. It's a cool ability. Underutilized. All right, looking at some of the key pieces for the deck, we of course have Haniel. Many of you will be familiar with that one, as well as Coella. And then we also have 2 pieces here. We've got Miasma Labyrinth and Super Celestia Saber, which came out during set 0. Yeah, still good.
Let's see. Now, what's up with Machina Wing Slash? You're talking about for an assist?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty good one because not only does it open a lane, it also gets a card back, a
Bingo.
specific card. And then we've also got Animirage, which, it opens a lane for its enter ability, but its life burst isn't that bad either. With add target Signy without a guard from your trash to your hand or put it onto the field.
Yeah, basically, if you look at all these, they all do some amount of like lane opening, some amount of filtering, kind of some amount of defensiveness board states.
Yeah, pretty good.
Miasma Labyrinth and Super Celestia Saber can bring guards back to your hand. That's relevant, for this kind of a deck.
Coella not only gives you like defense on your opponent's turn, but also both it and Haniel have the pay 1 to look through the top 3 cards of your deck.
One of the few ways to truly interact with your opponent, by the way, is that Coella. Because it's a trigger that happens and then you choose the target, so.
Yes. Moving on, we've got Komei, which is a pretty good white choice. We've also got Lancelot and Random Drain.
Yeah, so this is basically saying what colors would you like to add to your black or white mid-range deck, right? To give it that spice. And your options are green, red, and blue, obviously. If you're not
outside of just white
and black
as well.
Yeah. So the you'll notice the Komei is in the green section, and that's because technically I count it as a green card since it has Harmony Green.
Oh, that's a good point.
So it's basically multicolor anyways. But yeah, you could be this mid-range white deck where you are basically build your own Tama with Komei. And then Mel Invisible is just an amazing assist.
Yeah, just like stop 3 damage. I mean, it's a 3-stop. It's a classic 3-stop, which is where you pay to grow, you get an ability, you discard cards, you get another ability of the same kind.
Yep.
And then you pay extra enter, and you get a third ability of the same kind.
But it also stops Elrig damage again. It's fantastic.
Yep.
You can add red, and if you add red, you kind of solve some of your damage problems because you've got Lancelot and you've got like Internal Influence. So between the two of them, you basically have probably about 6 cards that you've added to the deck that opens up lanes.
Yeah, and just pretty good removal. Now, what about blue? Because Random Drain is all about drawing cards and making your opponent discard cards, and Zirconium is not too far off from that as well.
Yeah, if you're already in the I'm sort of a generic attrition deck that white and black midrange ends up being in, adding blue to be like I am the ultimate attrition deck is not a terrible option. So the next one is White Aggro.
White Aggro. I'm sure many of you have actually already played against this, and it's probably Tama center deck.
Yeah, usually. There's a few other kind of like White Aggro decks that you could possibly put together, but generally speaking, it's Tama. So what are our pros and cons?
The pros are you. Oh, sorry. I read that wrong. I thought it said you could bounce a Larig, and I'm like, no, you absolutely cannot.
It's just Musica.
The pros are that you have bounce in the Larig deck, meaning that you can bounce something from the field back to your opponent's hand. You also get card advantage, and you get reach with the Larigs. The cons are that it has no evasion, limited defense, and sometimes the bounce never fully answers your problems.
Right. Well, we have an Amazon worker coming in, so let me go ahead and take the dog.
Yeah, hold on one second. Good girl.
All right.
Someone was at the door. It's okay.
So the dog is now with me.
Give us some good breathing, baby girl.
So we've got bounce in the Elrig deck, right? This means basically that you have a way to answer pretty much any problem Signy that you can encounter, because bounce is just a generic catch-all answer, while simultaneously always having access to it because it's in your Elrig deck.
Yep.
So that means that all of your your main deck basically is everything that you need outside of removal, but your main game plan is going to be doing removal, right? Is just going to be opening lanes and attacking through.
Right.
And that's where the bounce in the the Elrig deck comes in, because you'll always have access to it.
Yes. And bounce is also great because not only does it help clear a lane, it also enter denies as well.
Right.
Which over time can add up to a significant amount of enter denied through the game. So you also get card advantage. This is kind of similar with what we talked about last time. You know, you do have access to the Signies such as Haniel, Coella, Arquin, all of those projection maps that will help you filter and get cards back to your hand. You also have the ability to use like Akino assists or Akino-like assists, such as Lion, which can get you back a guard for an extra cost, or Lion Dig, which is also going to help you get back cards.
Yeah. And then the final thing is that you get reach with your Elrig.
What does that mean?
Most of the time, that the whatever you're playing is going to also kind of help you get there with your Elrig. So, for example, in Tama in this scenario, when you're out of bounds, the field is full up, you can't get around it. You can switch over to, all right, I'm just going to attack twice with my Elrig. So getting there
Gotcha.
a little bit longer with your Elrig can help you.
So, going into the cons, there's no evasion in this deck. What do you mean by that?
No assassin, no lancer, nothing like that. No, none of those cool abilities that'll help you get around Signy. You have to bounce things.
Gotcha. Does that also tie in with the limited defense, you think? So there's no fancy defense, really?
Not really. Yeah, like you see some versions of white aggro, and they end up doing something like they have an Anj assist and then a Lion assist, and it's because their Anj is truly 100% offensive. They need something that's 100% defensive to balance it out. But generally speaking, a lot of people have started to lean more towards like Akino, which is a bounce first and then like a guard thing second.
Yep.
So you really, it's just a very small amount of defensive slice that you get in the white aggro deck. So you can get blown out by these red decks with Double Crush, for example.
Right. So that leads us on to our last con, which is that bounce never fully answers your problems. And this can be true for honestly a lot of different bounce decks, but it's particularly notable in white aggro, which sometimes if you're bouncing a lot of stuff, it feels like you're just delaying the inevitable.
Right.
Because if you're not seeing it this turn, you're probably going to see it next turn.
Right. So let's say, for example, you put out Nexia. The opponent's who's the white the white aggro deck is going to bounce it, lose one of their attacks, and then you put the Exia back on the field next
Exactly.
turn. And it's just like, it's this never-ending problem. 2 Exia, just basically, if you can put, at any point in time against white aggro, you can put down 2 Exia, the game's over for the white aggro deck.
Ooh. Spicy.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're just going to close off 2 lanes, limit their damage down to like 1.
Not that that matters for like Lurigs like Tama that can attack multiple times.
Sure.
But it's still
It's a cost.
really
It's a cost.
annoying. Remember, if it annoys Tiffany, it's probably good. And Exia annoys me.
That's true.
All right, moving on to our next slide. We've got some assists for your consideration. We've got Anj level 1 and Anj level 2. So these are going to be the more aggressive, bouncy Anjes for your white aggro deck. So not only do these bounce, but they also trash as well, which is like extra enter denial.
Yep.
And taking more opportunities away from your opponent while still opening up lanes.
Yep.
We've also got White Heaven, which does the same thing. It bounces and trashes as well. And then for the Lurigs that we're going to be recommending to you, we of course recommend Tama and Akino for centers.
Yep, and that gives you that reach that we were talking about. We've got some extra options now that are like, those were a lot of your Elrig bounce options. You have a few main deck bounce options here. Among them is going to be Over Pursuit and Flash cards. These cards have just recently come out, but when I made the slides, they weren't.
Over Pursuit is a spell, and Flash cards is a Signy.
Yep. Both of them bounce, which is really important to say. Same thing with Osiris. It bounces.
I will say that I haven't run into very many Osirises.
Yeah, there usually is like a 1 of or 2 of at the top end of your white aggro decks.
Yeah, it's almost like a Influend D. All right, moving on to the next slide. We've got Miracle Draw. What does that help with?
So this is like the limited amount of like being able to refill your hand or, get there with card advantage that we were talking about. So Koella, again, refills your hand. So does the Miracle Draw. Miracle Draw arguably a little bit better than Koella in this scenario. And then you'll see pretty much all the Elrig options that you have for playing white aggro pretty much get you a card in hand or 2.
Yeah. So would you also recommend an MC Lion center for this deck then?
I don't love it, but you can do it. It won a
not
ceremony.
It's Lion.
That's true. You're right. It won a ceremony. So, the second ceremony, it got 2nd place, I think.
Could be spicy.
Yeah.
Here is our sample deck list for our white aggro deck. And as you'll see in here, you can see a lot of the themes that we've been talking about, such as all of the cards that we just went over. Exias, of course, remembers as well, but also the Zhao Yuns and the Yukis for your utility level ones. The Zhao Yuns is going to give you just a little bit of defense. We've been playing Zhao Yuns for quite some time in this game, so you know that they are kind of a sticky level 1, which is great.
And there's also Kushu over there as one of the set 9 cards that are coming out that has just literally Shadow level 1. So it can't be messed with by level 1 Elrigs either.
Yes.
But generally speaking, it's the same basic deck that you're pretty used to. It just bounces and has a little bit more bounce than the main deck. All right, so the last thing that we're covering is basically miscellaneous. So we're going to talk about some random decks that you could bring to the GP, by the way, if you like these centers, and maybe win their sleepies. If not, you can also expect to probably run into one of them or something. And I don't mean like one, like you're going to see at least one of these every round.
We can't guarantee that, but we're just saying that these may come up during the GP as something like what we would consider like non-standard viable, maybe?
Yeah.
Is how we want to put it. So these are decks that you may see others playing, or maybe you've come across them in your locals.
Yeah, so the first one is a Musica aggro deck, which will be utilizing the aggressiveness of some of the stronger main phase assists that you can double down on. Tiffany, you've got the most experience with it, so why don't you talk about it?
I actually really like Musica for Cosmos. That's the deck that I've been playing with a lot lately. And I think that her once a game ability is really great because then you can get more use out of your assist Lurigs by playing one of them a second time. And depending on the timing and the assist Lurig that you choose to do that with, it can kind of make or break a game, which is very swingy. And I like that for decks that tend to go a little bit longer, especially in this format. But what's more is that Musica has her 2 auto abilities, which come in very, very handy and can be used in a variety of ways, such as the first ability, which is during your turn when a Lurig grows, you can give target signy in your opponent's field -5. And for most things, that will knock it down into like vanishable territory, Lancer territory. So that's something that I really like, is it kind of gives you a little bit of an extra push. But her second auto ability, I would think, is just as good as long as you remember it's something that happens. Which is that when your opponent's Lurig grows on their turn, so during their main phase or during their attack phase, because it just says during your opponent's turn, you can add target black signy from your trash to your hand.
Yep.
So that's pretty decent black trash recursion in my mind. And that plays exceptionally well with things in the Cosmos deck.
Right. So outside of that, here's these assists that you're probably going to see played against you with Musica. And they are Ray, which is kind of an interesting one because you can reuse it a couple times. And what it ends up basically saying is you draw 4 cards and the opponent discards 4 cards. So you can basically get rid of their hand. And X Step Out and X Step Out and Hanyo, arguably pretty close to the same thing with only one slight difference.
Yeah.
And that is that you can get all your enter back, by the way, that you spent on it. It's like a down payment. And
it's like a down payment.
Yeah, it's like a rebate or whatever.
A rebate, I think, would
would
be a little bit more accurate because you're paying 1 to grow them, but then you can enter charge 2. Exactly.
And then you get your options of assassin or double crush. Flavor your aggro accordingly.
Yeah. So with those, you could get assassin twice or double crush twice in an attack turn.
Right. So you already alluded to Cosmos.
That's how I primarily play Musica, but it's not the only way to play her.
It doesn't have to be with Musica, although I do argue that I think it's probably better with Musica. So how does the Cosmos deck play?
Basically, it all hinges on the Paradise Universe piece, which says that any Signy that is in your deck or your trash, if it's a Cosmos, it like counts as a level 1. So let's take a look at some of these cards and I'll kind of explain it. We're going to start with Karina, which is whenever this Signy attacks, reveal the top card of your deck. Then if that card is a level 1 Signy, pay 1 and Vanish target Signy with power 8,000 or less. With the Cosmos deck and Paradise Universe active, literally any card counts as a level 1 because it's in your deck. So you're guaranteed when Karina attacks to be able to pay 1 and vanish 8,000. And a lot of the cards in the deck are like that.
Yeah, I think that's a recurring theme.
That's the main recurring theme. It also means that for when you can get things back, like if you're running Haniel with it, you can get back any card because that card is technically in your deck.
Yep. Bernice's also has the same life burst where it says you can bring a level 1 or 2 back from your trash to the field. But with Paradise Universe, everything's a level 1.
Any Cosmos is a level 1, so you can get anything. It's a really fun deck, in my opinion. It's one of my favorites to play.
Yep. It's worth mentioning, too, that Altar is one of the only ways to do it, like, vanish a lane for free in the game right now. So,
yeah, for free, quote-unquote. There's a lot of different ways to do it.
Moving along into the next one, we've got Black Aggro Stuffs. Yeah, I don't know how to exactly put it. It has a lot of mill involved in it, as you'll see with this, right? Like, there's a lot of ways to make it so that your opponent is milling themselves out. Lucifer, I think, has a little bit of mill in it, right? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so does Maho Maho. Mm-hmm. So you're milling your opponent out a bit, and that's going to get you an extra damage. I've seen some Black Aggro decks mill opponents out successfully 3 times, which is nuts.
That is a lot.
And again, refresh is the best form of damage in the game. Mm-hmm. So
it's pretty unavoidable.
Yeah. So it's pretty good. And then it's just outside of that, you're packing yourselves with a lot of ways to get cheap damage. Mm-hmm. So the Ogana will open up lanes. Negative 3,000 is pretty good. Mm-hmm. Lucifer can do negative 2,000 for each Black Elrig, so that's usually 4,000 or 6,000 for free, which is pretty cool. And Caesar, it's pretty easy in Black to get Caesar's requirements out there to get yourself Assassin. Yeah. And that's just it's a Black Enter Assassin, which is really, really strong.
Yeah, with 7 or more cards in your trash, that's very easily obtainable.
Yeah.
In Black.
You should be treating against Black aggro decks. You should be treating your deck basically. You should be treating them just as like you would treat any aggro deck, and you'd probably be fine with it. Mm-hmm. With the caveat of maybe watch what's in their trash a little bit more closely, and also maybe don't mill yourself at all. Like you don't, like for example, that also includes things like enter charging or drawing a card, discarding a card, or drawing extra cards, right? That's technically milling yourself. So you're just helping them at that point, right? Like you want to make it hard for them to hit their second refresh. They'll hit their first refresh every time. Yeah. So but you're fine with 1, but you got to make sure that the second refresh is difficult.
All right, moving on. We've got some honorable mentions for red midrange.
Right.
Which is Carnival.
Arguably, this is going to be the best red midrange deck that you can possibly play. Red doesn't play midrange or control easily. It plays tempo and aggro really well. Mm-hmm. But it's not really great at these slower games. The only exception, and that's because most of the time when you look at their centers, most of their centers aren't built for that. Most of the centers are built for just quick damage. Carnival's a different sort of beast. She is able to do a lot of things that you would prefer to have in like a blue or white mid-range deck. But she's red. But getting access to red, that also means that you get some opening lane options, which is not usual in white or blue, so it's kind of nice. Anyways, Carnival's an interesting card, and that's mostly because Carnival and Paraluke combo so well and so efficiently together. So when you've talked about this before, how do these two pair with each other?
How do they pair with each other?
Yeah.
Well, Carnival gives you 2 coins. And the Paraluke Signy says, once a turn you can pay 2 coins and your opponent discards a card. And then once a turn for Carnival, you can discard a card and your Lyrig gains 1 of 3 fantastic abilities. I'm gonna have to reread.
Yeah,
these,
so you get one of 3 fantastic abilities. You arguably like draw a card. You like enter charge, but probably the more important one
here it is
being able to put a Signy, the opponent in the opponent's field
Yeah.
into the trash at the end of turn. That ends up being like Gaebolg, which is a great card for any discard deck. Mm-hmm. But having it stapled onto your center Elrig means you always have access to it. But you were saying, Tiff?
Sorry, I found it. Okay, so to gain the once a turn abilities for Carnival, you have to discard a card. But the top two texts in Paraluke say, during your main phase, when you discard a Signy, put that card from your trash onto your field. And during your turn, when a Signy enters your field from a zone other than a player's hand, freeze target Signy in your opponent's field, and it gets -2 until end of turn. So basically, you can activate Carnival's ability, and also play a Signy from your trash, and freeze target Signy and gets -2,000 for your opponent.
Which is excellent when you look at Carnival's once per game.
Honestly, you're discarding a card to do like 8 things.
Well, not even discarding. It goes onto the field.
Yeah.
You're playing a card to do like 8 things. But the once per game allows you to take 2 Signy on the opponent's field and turn them into vanillas. They have no text after that, and they become 1,000 power, which is less than -2,000. So you kill it. So this is one of the few ways where you can be like, yeah, H2O is dead, Remember's dead, that 2,000 Tamago is dead.
Dead.
And the opponent can be like, hold on, it has effects. And you go, nope, it doesn't. They're dead. They're just dead.
It is a Servant 0, colorless, with no abilities, meaning it doesn't even have multi-enter.
Yeah, you got nothing.
While it's on the field. Oh, man. Yeah, no, I think that this one will be, this particular duo will be interesting to look out for, but we haven't seen it a whole lot yet, which is why it's in our honorable mentions category.
Well, it's also set 9, so that's probably the main reason why we haven't seen it
it's
yet.
not like we don't play with proxies with friends. You guys know what I mean.
It's in the Japanese meta a bit here and there. It's not like an amazing standout thing, because you'd rather your combos be in your Elrig deck, basically, and this is something that needs to be in your main deck, so you could play a game and miss it completely.
Sure.
But it is an interesting deck, and that I think people should at least know exists.
And it will, since it is set 9, it will be around for the GP, so keep a lookout.
And that's it. That's basically all of the other decks that you see. You look, there might be some more in there. You might end up with green control or green aggro or like mono blue freeze. These other decks may exist as options.
Sure.
And you're gonna run into them, but realistically, if you try to figure out strategies to beat all of the ones that we've mentioned in all these past videos, you should be good enough to be like, all right, I'm finding something that's unusual here, but I'm ready to fight against it.
Yeah, because remember, variety is the spice of Wixoss, but we've got you covered.
And remember to answer that comment down below. Are you if you were to go to the GP, are you planning to bring a brew of your own with your own favorite center, or do you want to try to bring a standard deck to do well? Not that you can't do
not that you can't do well with your favorites.
Sometimes
but,
surprise factors really important.
Sometimes you have to choose between your favorites and what you think is the most optimal, highly competitive deck, and that's totally fine. Either way, let us know in the comment section down below. Of course, you can check out our community tab where we currently have a poll up for what decks we're going to be playing against each other. I think my poll is still active and Andrew's should be up soon, so please keep a lookout for that. Make sure you subscribe as we gear up for the GP, and may you always flip a life burst.
Bye everybody.